The last thing I saw before the world turned gray wasn't my son's face. It was the back of his wife's smartphone. Janet was recording me. She wasn't calling emergency services. She was laughing. My chest felt like it was being crushed by a semi-truck. My heart, it wasn't beating anymore. It was flopping, like a fish out of water. Janet leaned over me, her eyes cold and mean. "Look at her, Danny," she sneered into the camera. "The Oscar goes to your mother." Then she said the words that broke what was left of my heart. "We threw your meds in the trash, Louise. We wanted to prove you're just seeking attention. Stop acting. Get up and finish the dishes." I looked at my son, my only boy. He just stood there. He didn't help me. He didn't reach for the phone. He just watched me die. If you are a woman of my age, you know what it's like to be invisible. I'm Louise Best. I'm 72 years old. I've lived in this house in Ohio for 40 years. I raised my children here. I thought I knew what family meant. But that Sunday afternoon, I realized I was living with strangers. It started around 4 p.m. I felt the flutter first. It's a strange feeling in your chest. Not a pain, exactly. More like a bird trapped under your ribs, beating its wings too fast. My doctor calls it atrial fibrillation. AFib. To me, it just feels like my life is slipping out of rhythm. I was at the kitchen sink, scrubbing the pan from the pot roast. Janet and Danny were in the living room. I felt the cold sweat start. It breaks out on your forehead and the back of your neck. It's an oily, freezing sweat that tells you something is very wrong. "Janet," I called out. My voice sounded thin, like paper. "I need my pills. The little white ones in the cabinet." I heard the sofa creak. Janet walked into the kitchen. She didn't look worried. She looked annoyed. She had that look she always gets when I ask for help. Like I'm a burden. Like I'm a chore she forgot to finish. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Louise," she said. She crossed her arms. "The heart pills? Again, we just had a nice dinner. Why do you always have to ruin the mood?" I couldn't answer her. The air wouldn't go into my lungs. Imagine trying to breathe through a tiny coffee straw. That's what it feels like when your heart stops pumping right. Your blood doesn't get the oxygen. Your brain starts to panic. I reached for the counter. My fingers were numb. I'm not acting. I wheezed. By now, Danny had walked in. He looked at Janet. Then he looked at me. I saw the doubt in his eyes. Janet has been whispering in his ear for months. She tells him I'm lonely. She tells him I make up symptoms so they won't move out and leave me alone. "Mom," Danny sighed. That sigh, it hurt worse than the chest pressure. "Janet says she saw you jogging to the mailbox yesterday. You were fine then. Why is it always a heart attack when it's time to clean up?" I tried to reach for the cabinet where I keep my emergency meds. My hand was shaking. I knocked over a glass. It shattered on the floor. That's when Janet pulled out her phone. "I'm recording this," she chirped. She was smiling. A real, genuine smile. "I'm going to show this to your doctor. I want him to see how you fake these episodes the minute Danny talks about Florida." I fell. My knees hit the linoleum hard. The pain in my chest changed. It wasn't a flutter anymore. It was a squeeze. A deep, hollow ache that radiated up into my jaw. If you ever feel a pain in your jaw or your left arm, listen to me. Don't wait. That is your body saying goodbye. I lay there, staring at the dust bunnies under the fridge. I couldn't move. "Danny," I gasped. He took a step toward me. I saw the fear finally start to break through his face. But Janet grabbed his arm. "Don't," she hissed. "If you help her now, she wins. She'll do this every week. We already checked, Danny. Those pills she takes, they're mostly just vitamins and blood thinners. We threw the new bottle out this morning to see if she'd even notice." I looked at them. My son, My daughter-in-law. They had stolen my medicine. They had decided my life was a game. The room began to spin. The light from the kitchen window turned a sickly yellow. I heard a knock at the back door. It was Mrs. Higgins from next door. She's 80. We've been friends since the 80s. Louise, I saw the glass break through the window. Is everything okay? I heard her voice, but it sounded like she was underwater. I tried to scream for her. Nothing came out. Janet didn't even turn around. We're fine, Mrs. Higgins. Janet shouted toward the door. Louise just dropped a dish. She's fine. We're handling it. I saw Mrs. Higgins' face through the screen door. She looked confused. She stayed there for a second. I prayed she would come in. I prayed she would see me on the floor. But Janet moved to block the view. She was so calm, so practiced. Go home, Martha, Janet said sweetly. We're just having a family talk. The door closed. The last bit of hope went with it. I looked up at Danny one last time. I wanted to tell him I loved him. I wanted to tell him that I remembered holding him when he had the croup as a baby. How I stayed up all night so he could breathe. But I couldn't speak. Everything went black. The last thing I heard wasn't an ambulance. It was the sound of the save button clicking on Janet's phone. She had her evidence, but she didn't realize. So did I. You see, they thought I was a weak old woman. They thought I would wake up, apologize for the mess, and go back to being their servant. They thought they could steal my money and my house while I died in a corner. But they forgot one thing. I'm Louise Best, and I wasn't done living yet. Not by a long shot. I didn't always live on the kitchen floor. For 45 years, I lived in a dream. Our house on Willow Creek was the pride of the neighborhood, Christopher, and I bought it in 1979. The grass was always green. The shutters were painted a perfect colonial blue. Every shingle on that roof was paid for with sweat. Christopher worked 30 years at the steel mill. I worked 20 at the elementary school library. We weren't rich, but we were solid. Christopher was a man of few words. He didn't say, I love you every day. He showed it by changing the oil in my car before I even asked. He showed it by building me those custom bookshelves in the den. He was my protector. But 3 years ago, the protection started to slip. It started with the keys. Then it was the names of our grandchildren. The doctor called it early onset. I just called it a nightmare. My strong, silent husband was still there, but he was fading, like a photograph left in the sun too long. He would look at me sometimes with such confusion. He knew he loved me, but he couldn't remember why I was crying. That's when the burden started. If you've been married as long as I have, you understand. You don't want to be the one who breaks. I saw my husband losing his mind, and I decided I had to be the one to hold everything together. I didn't tell Danny about my heart flutters. I didn't tell him when the doctor prescribed the blood thinners and the beta blockers. Why? Because Danny had enough on his plate. He was living in Florida. He had a high-stress job in marketing. At least, that's what he told me. I started taking my meds in secret. I hid the orange plastic bottles in my knitting bag, under the yarn, way at the bottom. I would wait until Christopher was napping. Then I would go to the kitchen, swallow the pills, and sit very still until the dizziness passed. I didn't want to be a bother. I didn't want my son to think his mother was falling apart. I wanted to be the strong one, the one who still made the pies for Thanksgiving, the one who kept the house clean. But then the phone call came. Danny lost his job. He and Janet were between houses. That's the phrase they used. Mom, can we come stay for a few months? Just until we get back on our feet. Of course. What mother says no. I cleaned out the guest room. I bought new sheets. I even bought Janet's favorite coffee, the expensive kind. I thought having them here would help Christopher. I thought the house would feel full again. I was wrong. Janet arrived like a whirlwind. She didn't like the blue shutters. She didn't like the way I organized the pantry. But mostly, she didn't like me. She saw a woman who was tired. She saw a husband who couldn't remember what he had for breakfast. And she saw an opportunity. It started with helpful suggestions. Louise, you look so pale. Are you sure you should be driving? Louise, you forgot to turn off the stove. Maybe I should handle the cooking from now on. She wasn't being nice. She was building a case. She wanted Danny to see me as incompetent. She wanted him to see me as old. One afternoon, I was in the garden. Mrs. Higgins, my neighbor, she walked over to the fence. She's been my friend for 30 years. She looked at me, really looked at me. Louise, she whispered, "Are you okay? I saw Janet yelling at you on the porch yesterday. You looked frightened." I forced a smile. "Oh, Martha," I said, "you know how it is. Young people have so much energy. She's just trying to help." Martha Higgins didn't believe me. She wasn't helping Louise. She was pointing her finger in your face. And Danny, he just stood there with his head down. I felt a chill, even in the Ohio sun. "He's just stressed, Martha. They'll be fine once they find a house." But they weren't looking for a house. They were looking at my house. Janet started talking about downsizing. She talked about how the stairs were dangerous for me and Christopher. She talked about senior living communities. Warehouses. That's what they are. Places where they put people like us so they can have the keys to our lives. I tried to talk to Christopher about it. We were laying in bed. The moon was hitting the curtains. "Chris," I whispered, "I don't think Janet wants us to stay here." Christopher turned his head. His eyes were clear for a second. "This is our home, Lou," he said. "I built that deck. I planted that oak tree. We aren't going anywhere." But the next morning, he forgot we even had the conversation. He forgot. And Janet knew it. She realized that the only person standing in her way was me, and my little orange bottles. She started watching me. She would follow me into the kitchen. She would stand in the doorway while I tried to reach for my knitting bag. "What's in the bag, Louise?" she would ask. Her voice was like silk. "Just my yarn, Janet. Just my yarn." She knew I was lying, and I knew she was waiting. She wanted me to have an episode. She wanted me to look weak in front of Danny. She wanted him to think I was attention-seeking. That was her favorite word. Dramatic. Attention-seeker. Needy. She told Danny that my AFib was just anxiety. She told him I was doing it to keep them from moving back to Florida. And Danny, my sweet boy, he believed her. Why wouldn't he? It's easier to believe your mother is a liar than to believe your wife is a monster. One night, I caught her. I walked into the kitchen at midnight. The light under the stove was on. Janet was standing there. She had my knitting bag open. She was holding my heart medication. She wasn't reading the label. She was smiling. "Louise," she said. She didn't look guilty. She looked excited. "These have to go. They're making you foggy. They're making you act out. Give them back, Janet." I whispered. "No," she said. "I'm doing this for your own good. We're going to prove once and for all that you're just fine." She walked over to the trash can. The lid opened. The bottles hit the bottom with a hollow thud. My heart gave a little skip. A warning. I reached for the trash, but she grabbed my wrist. Her grip was strong. "Don't," she hissed, "unless you want Danny to wake up and see you digging through the garbage like a crazy woman." I looked into her eyes. I realized then she didn't just want the house. She wanted me gone. I went back to bed. I lay there, feeling my heart flutter, waiting for the Sunday dinner. waiting for the breath that wouldn't come. I thought I was alone, but I forgot about Mrs. Higgins. And I forgot about the one thing Janet couldn't control. My memory. I might be 72, but I remember everything. And I was about to make sure they would never forget it either. They arrived on a rainy Tuesday. 2 SUVs packed to the roof with boxes. Danny looked tired. Janet looked determined. "We're here to take the weight off your shoulders, Mom," Danny said. He kissed my cheek. He smelled like expensive cigars and desperation. Florida was just getting too fast for us. Janet chirped. She was already carrying a box of her shoes into my guest room. "We decided it was time to come home. To look after you and Christopher. You shouldn't be alone in this big house." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But I saw the past due notices peeking out of a folder in their backseat. They didn't come to help me. They came because they had nowhere else to go. The first week was quiet. Too quiet. Janet started reorganizing my life. It started with the kitchen. She moved my spice rack. She moved my favorite coffee mug. Then she moved my pill organizer. I went to the counter on Monday morning. The plastic box with the days of the week, it was gone. "Janet," I called out. She was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling on her phone. "Where are my heart meds? I need to take them before breakfast." She didn't look up. "Oh, I put those away, Louise." They were cluttering up the counter. It makes the house look like a nursing home. "Where are they?" I asked. "In the hall closet, on the top shelf. You need to move more. Anyway, it's good for your circulation." I'm 72 years old. The hall closet shelf is 6 feet high. I had to drag a kitchen chair across the floor just to reach my life-saving medicine. My heart started that familiar thump-thump in my throat. The stress, it's like fuel for AFib. "Danny," I said later that evening. He was watching the news with Christopher. Janet moved my pills. I almost fell off a chair trying to get them. "Can you talk to her?" Danny didn't even turn his head. "Mom, she's just trying to keep the house clean. You're always so sensitive lately. Maybe you're just tired." Sensitive. Tired. Those were the first seeds. Janet was planting them in his mind. One by one. A few days later, I ran out of my blood thinners. The pharmacy is only 2 miles away. Usually, I drive myself, but Janet had borrowed my car keys to go to the salon. "I'll pick up your prescription on the way back, Louise," she promised. She didn't come back until 8 p.m. "Oh, I totally forgot," she said. She was laughing. She was showing Danny her new highlights in the hallway mirror. The pharmacy was so crowded. And honestly, Louise, you looked so energetic today. I don't think you even need those pills. You're just addicted to the routine." "Janet, I can't skip a dose," I whispered. "My doctor said." "Your doctor wants your money," she interrupted. She looked at Danny. "See, this is what I was telling you, babe. She gets so anxious over nothing. It's a cry for attention. She wants us to feel guilty for having a life." Danny looked at me. "Mom, just go to sleep. We'll get them tomorrow. Stop making a scene." I went to my room. I sat on the edge of the bed and held Christopher's hand while he slept. He didn't know. He didn't know his wife was being treated like a difficult child in her own home. I felt a coldness in my chest that had nothing to do with my heart. It was the feeling of being erased. The next morning, I saw Mrs. Higgins again. She was at her mailbox. I walked out to get the paper. My legs felt heavy, like I was walking through deep mud. "Louise," she called out. She walked to the edge of the driveway. "I saw Janet take your car again this morning, and I saw her throwing a bag into the big trash bin. It looked like pharmacy bottles." My stomach dropped. She told me she was going to the pharmacy for me. "Martha," I said. My voice was shaking. Martha Higgins looked at my house. She saw Janet watching us from the upstairs window. Janet didn't wave. She just closed the curtain. Louise, listen to me, Martha whispered. That girl is telling the neighbors you're losing your mind. She told the mailman, you keep forgetting that you already took your medicine. She's saying you're dangerous to yourself. I couldn't breathe. I'm not forgetting. Martha, I'm not. I know you're not, Martha said. She grabbed my hand, but Danny believes her. I saw them talking on the porch. He looked convinced. You need to be careful. I walked back inside. The house felt different. The air felt thin. I went to the kitchen to make tea. Janet was there. She was pouring a glass of wine, having a little chat with the neighbor, Louise, telling her more stories about your heart. I'm not telling stories, Janet. She stepped closer. She smelled like expensive perfume and wine. Danny and I had a talk, she said. Her voice was low. Dangerous. He thinks you're getting too lonely. He thinks this house is too much for you to manage. We've started looking at some specialty homes in Florida, places where they can monitor your condition 24 hours a day. I'm not going to Florida, I said. I'm staying in my home. Janet laughed. It was a sharp, ugly sound. We'll see about that, especially after the episode you're going to have. What does that mean? It means Danny is already starting to worry about your attention-seeking behavior. Every time you complain about your heart, he pulls further away from you. He's tired, Louise. We're both tired. She walked away. I stood there, clutching the kitchen counter. I felt the flutter, like a drum in my ears. I realized her plan. She wasn't just moving my pills. She was making sure that when I finally did collapse, nobody would believe it was real. She was turning my own son against my survival. But I saw the iPad on the counter. Danny's iPad. He had left his email open. I knew I shouldn't look, but I did. And that's when I saw the subject line from a real estate agent. Offer accepted, Willow Creek property. They weren't just waiting for me to get sick. They were already selling my house. I felt the sweat on my forehead, the oily, freezing sweat. But I didn't reach for the phone. I didn't call for Danny. I walked to the hall closet. I dragged that chair across the floor. And I waited. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a witness to a crime. And the trial was about to begin at Sunday dinner. In my house, that used to mean laughter. It meant the smell of slow-roasted beef and yeast rolls. But this Sunday, the air felt like ice. I was standing at the stove, stirring the gravy. My hands were shaking. Every time I looked at Danny, I saw that email in my head. Offer accepted. He was selling the roof over his father's head while his father was still sitting in the living room. Dinner's ready, I called out. My voice felt tight. Christopher came to the table first. He looked so handsome in his flannel shirt, but he was wearing his slippers on the wrong feet. Janet saw it. She smirked. Look at that, Danny, she whispered loud enough for me to hear. They can't even dress themselves anymore. It's getting dangerous, babe. Really dangerous. Danny didn't look up from his plate. He just started eating. He looked like a man who was trying to hide inside his own skin. Then it happened. It wasn't a flutter this time. It was a thump. A heavy, hollow kick inside my ribs. My heart skipped one beat. Then two. Then it started racing. It felt like a runaway train inside my chest. I dropped the serving spoon. It hit the floor with a loud clack. Gravy splashed onto my shoes. Louise. Janet snapped. Watch what you're doing. I just mopped that floor. I couldn't breathe. I reached for the edge of the table. My vision started to blur. The edges of the room were turning dark, like someone was turning down a lamp. Danny, I wheezed. My purse. Get my purse. I keep my nitroglycerin in my purse. It's a tiny brown bottle. It's the only thing that opens up my blood vessels when the squeeze starts. Danny looked up. He looked worried for a split second, but Janet leaned over and touched his hand. Danny, don't, she said. Her voice was calm, almost bored. She's doing it again, right when we were about to talk about the Florida move. It's a classic panic attack, Louise. Just breathe into a paper bag. No, I gasped. The pain was moving now. It was a sharp, hot needle poking into my left shoulder. It felt like my jaw was being squeezed in a vice. I pushed away from the table. I stumbled toward the kitchen counter where I keep my knitting bag. I tore the yarn out. Blue wool, green wool, pink wool. It went everywhere. I reached the bottom. Empty. The orange bottles were gone. The little brown vial of nitro, gone. I looked at Janet. She was sitting there, calmly sipping her water. Looking for these? She asked. She reached into her apron pocket. She pulled out my medication. She didn't give them to me. She just held them up like a prize. I tidied up earlier, Louise, she said. I figured since you're so healthy, you didn't need these placebo pills anymore. They're probably just making you imagine these symptoms anyway. Janet, please, I begged. I was on my knees now. The floor felt freezing. Danny stood up. Janet, give her the pills. She looks really white. She's holding her breath. Danny. Janet shouted. She stood up too. She's trying to scare you. She wants you to feel like a murderer if you leave her here. It's emotional abuse, Danny. Look at her. I looked at my son. I tried to reach for his hand. Danny, please help me. He hesitated. He looked at me. Then he looked at his wife. Mom, just stop it, he whispered. Just get up. Please. Don't do this to us. He didn't believe me. My own flesh and blood thought I was a liar. I felt the sweat. That oily, freezing sweat. My heart gave one last violent jerk. The room tilted. I saw the underside of the table. I saw Christopher's slippers. He was crying now. He didn't understand what was happening, but he knew I was hurt. Lou, he whimpered. Lou, get up. Janet walked over to me. She didn't help me. She pulled out her phone. She started recording. The Oscar goes to your mother, she sneered into the camera. She leaned down close to my ear. Her breath smelled like the roast beef I had cooked for her. We threw your meds in the trash, Louise. She hissed. We wanted to prove you're just seeking attention. Stop acting. Get up and finish the dishes. I heard a thud at the back door. Mrs. Higgins. She must have heard the shouting. Louise, I'm coming in. I heard the screen door creak. I heard her gasp as she saw me on the floor. Oh my God! Louise! I heard Janet's voice, sharp and fast. Get out, Martha! She's just having a fit. We have it under control. I wanted to tell Martha to call emergency services. I wanted to tell her they took my pills. But my lungs were empty. There was no air left. The blackness came fast. It started at the corners of my eyes and swallowed the whole kitchen. The last thing I felt was the cold linoleum against my cheek. And the last thing I heard was the sound of Janet laughing. They thought it was the end. They thought they had won. But they forgot one thing about me. I've survived 40 years of steel mill winters. I've survived losing my husband's mind. And I was going to survive this. Because when I woke up, I wasn't going to be their mother anymore. I was going to be their reckoning. Everything went silent. The first thing I felt was the cold. It wasn't the freezing Ohio wind. It was the cold of a hospital bed. The sheets felt like paper. The air smelled like bleach and old floor wax. Beep, beep, beep. That sound. If you've ever spent a night in a cardiac ward, you never forget that rhythm. It's the sound of a machine telling the world you're still here. I tried to open my eyes. My eyelids felt like they were taped shut with lead. Lou. A voice. Small. Trembling. I forced my eyes open. Christopher was sitting in a plastic chair next to my bed. He looked diminished. His hair was a mess. He was wearing his winter coat, even though the room was warm. He was clutching my hand so hard his knuckles were purple. "Lou, you're awake," he whispered. Tears were streaming down his face. "Chris," I croaked. My throat felt like I had swallowed a handful of dry sand. "Where are we?" "Columbus," he said. "The big hospital. Mrs. Higgins. She called the ambulance. She wouldn't let Janet stop her. Thank God for Martha Higgins." I closed my eyes again. I wasn't ready to talk. I wanted to drift back into the blackness where the pain couldn't find me. But then I heard the door heavy click open. I did something I've learned to do over 40 years of marriage. I played dead. I kept my breathing even. I kept my eyes shut. I wanted to hear the truth. "Mr. Best." It was a man's voice. Deep. Authoritative. The doctor. "I'm Danny," my son's voice said. He sounded irritated, not worried, just bothered. "My father he's not really focused right now. You can talk to me. And my wife, Janet." I felt Christopher's hand tremble against mine. "Well, Mr. Best." "Danny," the doctor said. I heard the rustle of a clipboard. "Your mother is a very lucky woman. Her heart enzymes, specifically her troponin levels, were off the charts." "What does that mean?" Janet asked. She sounded bored, like she was waiting for a bus. "It means her heart muscle was dying," the doctor said. His voice turned cold. This wasn't a panic attack. This was a severe cardiac event brought on by a total lack of her prescribed medication. If that neighbor hadn't forced her way in and called emergency services, your mother would be in the morgue right now. Silence. I waited for the sound of Danny's knees hitting the floor. I waited for him to sob. I waited for him to say, "Oh my God, Mom, I'm so sorry." Instead, I heard a snort. "Doctor, you don't know my mother," Danny said. His voice was flat, empty. She probably didn't take those pills on purpose. She's been acting out ever since we talked about moving. She wanted to scare us. She wanted a big dramatic scene to make us feel guilty. The air left my lungs. Again, she's an attention seeker, Janet added. I could hear the smirk in her voice. She probably hid the bottles herself. She's been playing my husband like a fiddle for years. This was just her grand finale. "The enzymes don't lie, Mrs. Best," the doctor replied. He sounded disgusted now. "Body chemistry isn't drama. Your mother almost died." "Yeah, well," Danny muttered. "She's stable now, right? Can we take her home tomorrow? We have a lot of things to settle with the house. We can't spend all week in Columbus." I lay there, stiff, cold. My own son, the boy I taught to ride a bike, the boy whose fever I broke with cool cloths at 3 a.m. He didn't see a mother. He saw a scheduling conflict. He saw a barrier to his Florida sunshine. I felt a hot, searing anger start to bloom in my gut. It was stronger than the AFib. It was stronger than the exhaustion. The doctor walked out. I heard the door close. Finally, Janet whispered, "Danny, did you see the way he looked at us? Like we're criminals. We need to get her back to Willow Creek, sign those papers, and get out of this state. This place is depressing." "I know, Jan," Danny said. "I'll talk to her when she wakes up. I'll tell her," the doctor said. "She needs a change of scenery. We'll have her in that Florida facility by Friday." They started talking about which furniture they would keep. They talked about selling my mother's silver. They talked about me like I was already a ghost. I felt Christopher's grip tighten on my hand. He was still crying. He couldn't follow the doctor's words, but he knew our son was being mean. "Danny," Christopher whimpered, "be nice to your mother." "Shut up, Dad," Danny snapped. "Go get some coffee or something. You're giving me a headache. That was it. That was the moment the good mother died. The woman who made the pot roast, she was gone. The woman who swallowed her pride to keep the peace, she was buried. I opened my eyes. I didn't look at Danny. I didn't look at Janet. I looked at the ceiling. Danny, I said. My voice wasn't a croak anymore. It was thin, but it was sharp, like a razor blade. They both jumped. Janet dropped her phone. Mom, Danny said. He tried to put on that fake golden sun smile. You're awake. We were so worried. The doctor says you just had a little scare because you forgot your meds. I didn't forget. Danny, I said. I turned my head and looked him right in the eye. I saw the cowardice there. I heard everything. The room went dead silent. Janet's face turned a strange shade of gray. Louise, you were dreaming, she stammered. The medication makes you hallucinate. I'm not dreaming, Janet, I said, and I'm not going to Florida. I looked at my husband. Chris, call Martha Higgins. Tell her I need her to come pick you up. I have some business to take care of here. Mom, don't be ridiculous. Danny started. Out, I said. Get out of this room. Both of you. Out. I screamed. The heart monitor started to beep. The nurses came running in. Danny and Janet were pushed into the hallway. I lay back against the pillows. My heart was pounding, but for the first time, it wasn't from sickness. It was from the thrill of the fight. They thought they were selling my house. They thought they were throwing away my life. But they didn't realize I still had the passwords to the bank accounts. I still had the deed in my name. And most importantly, I still had Martha Higgins. I closed my eyes. The real work was about to begin. They brought me home on Thursday. Danny drove the Buick. He was being careful now. He hit every speed bump at 2 miles per hour. He kept looking at me in the rearview mirror with those big, sad, puppy dog eyes. You doing okay, Mom? He'd ask. I didn't answer. I just stared out the window at the Ohio trees. Janet was in the back seat. She was humming. She sounded like a woman who had just won the lottery. And in her mind, she had. She thought I was broken. She thought the scare had finally made me realize I was old and helpless. But she was wrong. When we got to the house, I didn't go to the kitchen. I didn't offer to make tea. I didn't ask Danny how his day was. I walked straight to my bedroom and closed the door. I'm tired, I told them through the wood. I need to rest. I heard Janet whisper in the hallway. See? She's finally giving in, Danny. The fight is out of her. Let's get the paperwork ready. The fight wasn't out of me. It was just changing shape. I sat on the edge of my bed. The room felt cold. Christopher was napping in his recliner in the corner. His breathing was heavy. I reached into my nightstand and pulled out my iPad. Danny bought me this for Christmas 3 years ago. He told the neighbors it was so I could play games and stay sharp. He thinks I only use it for solitaire and looking at photos of my grandkids. He forgot something important. I was the head of the elementary school library for 20 years. I managed budgets. I tracked every cent for the school board. I know how to find information, and I know how to follow a paper trail. I opened the shared history on the family computer link. Janet is lazy. She uses my iPad to browse the web when she's sitting in the living room. She never clears the history. She thinks I'm too old to understand what those little icons mean. I started scrolling. The first thing I saw was Zillow. My heart gave a little skip. Not the sick kind. The angry kind. There it was. 642 Willow Creek Drive. My house. The photos were from last week. Janet must have taken them while I was at the grocery store. The description said, motivated seller. Perfect for a young family. Quiet neighborhood. $450,000. That was the price of 40 years of my life. She was listing my home for sale while I was still sleeping in the master bedroom. But that wasn't the worst part. I kept scrolling. I found a folder in the downloads. Sunny Pines Assisted Living. I opened the brochure. It was a place in Florida. Not a nice place. It was one of those white-walled buildings where the rooms looked like cells. The reviews were terrible, understaffed, smells like ammonia, hidden fees. There was a scanned application form. Janet had already filled it out. She had listed Christopher as incompetent, and she had listed me as psychologically unstable. I felt the blood drain from my face. She wasn't just trying to get us out of the house. She was trying to lock us away. She wanted to be our legal guardian. That way, she would have total control over the steel mill pension, total control over the $200,000 Christopher had in his IRA. I felt like I was being buried alive. I looked at Christopher. He was still sleeping. He looked so peaceful. He had no idea that his own son was signing him away to a warehouse in the Florida heat. A soft knock at my window. I pulled back the curtain. It was Martha Higgins. She was standing in the flower bed. She had a small manila envelope in her hand. I cracked the window open. "Martha, what are you doing?" "Louise, listen to me," she whispered. She looked over her shoulder toward the kitchen. "I saw a man here yesterday while you were at the hospital. He had a camera. He was measuring the backyard." "I know, Martha," I said. "I found the listing on the internet." "That's not all," Martha said. She handed me the envelope. "I found this in my trash can this morning. Janet must have missed the bin when she was cleaning out your clutter yesterday. It was stuck between our fence posts." I opened the envelope. It was a letter from an attorney in Florida. It was addressed to Danny, regarding the power of attorney for Louise and Christopher Best. The letter said that since I had a documented cardiac event and mental confusion, the process would be easy. All Danny had to do was get me to sign one more insurance form, just one signature, and I would lose everything. "Thank you, Martha," I whispered. "You're a godsend." "What are you going to do, Lou?" I looked at the iPad. I looked at the Zillow listing. I looked at the face of the son I had loved for 40 years. "I'm going to give them exactly what they want, Martha." "What do you mean?" "They want a scene," I said. "They want drama. I'm going to give them a performance they'll never forget." I closed the window. I sat back down at the desk. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I opened my bank's website. Danny thinks I don't know the password to the joint legacy account, but I'm the one who set it up. And I'm the one who remembers his first dog's name, Buster. The screen loaded. $212,000. I moved $100,000 into a private account, one Janet didn't know existed. Then I moved the rest into a trust for Christopher's care, a trust that was locked tight. Then I did something even better. I went to the Zillow listing. I hit the button that said, "Report this listing." Reason for report. I typed, "I am the owner of this property. I have not authorized this sale. This is an attempt at elder fraud." I hit send. I felt the rhythm of my heart. It was steady, strong, like the ticking of a clock. The paper trail was done. The trap was set. Now, I just had to wait for Sunday, because on Sunday, we weren't having pot roast. We were having justice, and it was going to be served very, very cold. Sunday morning arrived with a clear, blue Ohio sky. I woke up early. I didn't feel tired. I didn't feel the flutter in my chest. I felt cold. The kind of cold that comes when you finally made up your mind about something. I went to the kitchen and started the prep. The ritual, searing the beef in the cast iron skillet, the hiss of the oil, the smell of onions and carrots. For 40 years, this was how I showed love. Today, it was just camouflage. Janet came downstairs around 10. She was wearing a bright yellow sundress. She looked like she was ready for a party. "Smells good, Louise," she said. She walked over and peeked into the pot. "I'm glad to see you're back to your old self. No more fainting today, right?" She winked at me, like we were sharing a secret. I forced a smile. "No, Janet, I feel very clear today. Very focused." "Good," she said. "Danny and I have some papers for you to look at after dinner. Just some boring insurance stuff. Since you had that scare, the company needs some updated signatures." I turned my back so she couldn't see my eyes. "Of course," I said. "Whatever helps the family." I heard her walk into the living room. "She's ready, Danny," I heard her whisper. "She's completely broken in." She didn't even argue about the salt. I kept stirring the gravy. I thought about the word broken. You can break a vase. You can break a bone. But you can't break a woman who has already seen the bottom of the pit. Around noon, I stepped out onto the back porch to get some fresh air. Martha Higgins was there. She was pretending to water her petunias near our shared fence. She looked at me, and then she looked at the kitchen window, where Janet was scrolling on her iPad. "Is it happening today, Lou?" Martha whispered. I nodded. "Everything is ready, Martha. Did you call that number I gave you?" "I did," Martha said. Her voice was trembling a little. "They'll be here by 2:00. Are you sure about this? He's your son." I looked at the oak tree Christopher had planted when Danny was born. It was big now, strong, but the roots were pushing up the sidewalk. He stopped being my son when he stood by and watched me suffocate. "Martha." "I understand," she said. She reached over the fence and squeezed my hand. "I'm right here if you need me. My phone is in my pocket. One shout, and I'm coming through that door." "Thank you, Martha, but I think I can handle this performance alone." I went back inside. Dinner was served at 1. I set the table with the good china, the gold-rimmed plates we only use for Christmas. I wanted it to look perfect. I wanted them to feel comfortable. Danny sat at the head of the table. My husband, Christopher, sat to my left. He was wearing a clean shirt I had ironed for him. He looked at the pot roast, and his eyes lit up. "Is it Sunday, Lou?" he asked. "It's Sunday, honey," I said. I patted his hand. "This is great, Mom," Danny said. He was eating fast, shoveling the mashed potatoes into his mouth. "See, this is what we want for you in Florida. Fresh food. No stress. You can just relax while Janet and I handle the house." "The house is already handled, Danny," I said softly. He didn't hear me. He was too busy talking to Janet about the commission on the sale. "If we close by the end of the month, we can get that condo in West Palm," Janet said. She was glowing. She looked at me and held up her wine glass. "To new beginnings, Louise. To your health." I picked up my water glass. "To the truth," I said. They both paused for a second. The word truth sounded heavy in the room. But then they laughed. They thought I was just being philosophical. We finished the meal. The plates were empty. Usually, this is when I would stand up and start the dishes. This is when I would spend an hour scrubbing the pots while they sat in the living room watching football. But I didn't move. "Louise, you okay?" Janet asked. She looked at the sink, then at me. "The dishes aren't going to wash themselves." "They can wait," I said. I reached down to the empty chair next to me. I picked up a thick manila folder. I placed it on the white tablecloth, right next to the gravy boat. "What's that?" Danny asked. He leaned forward. "Is that the insurance paperwork?" "Good. Let's get it over with so we can start packing the kitchen." "It's not insurance, Danny," I said. I opened the folder. Inside were 3 white envelopes. They were numbered. 1, 2, 3. I decided that since we're talking about new beginnings, we should be honest about the old ones. I handed the first envelope to Janet. Open it, I said. Janet's smile faltered. She took the envelope and tore it open. It was a printout of the Zillow report I had filed, and a letter from the county auditor. What is this? Janet hissed. It's a notification that the listing for 642 Willow Creek has been flagged for fraud, I said. It also says that if anyone tries to sell this property without the primary owner's physical presence at the courthouse, the police will be notified. Danny went pale. Mom, what did you do? We had a deal. We had an offer. You had an offer, Danny. I have a home. I handed the second envelope to Danny. He opened it slowly. His hands were shaking. Inside was the bank statement, the one showing the transfer of $100,000 into a private account in my name, and the trust document for Christopher. You stole the money, Danny whispered. That was for Florida. That was our fallback. That was my husband's life savings, Danny. The money he earned in that steel mill while you were at summer camp. It's not your fallback. It's his protection. Janet stood up. She slammed her hand on the table. You crazy old bat. You can't do this. We have power of attorney. We'll have you committed for this. I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I picked up the third envelope. This one is for both of you, I said. I slid it across the table. Danny opened it. Janet leaned over his shoulder. It was a photograph, a still shot from a video. It was a picture of me on the kitchen floor, clutching my chest, and it was a picture of Janet holding her phone and laughing. How? Janet whispered. You're not the only one who knows how to use an iPad, Janet, I said. You left your cloud account logged in. I found the video you recorded of me acting. I also found the messages you sent to your friends about throwing my placebo meds in the trash. I leaned forward. My voice was very quiet now. That's called endangering the elderly, Danny. In the state of Ohio, it's a felony. The room went silent. Absolute, crushing silence. Danny looked at Janet. Janet looked at the door. You wouldn't, Danny said. I'm your son. I looked at Christopher. He was staring at the photo. He didn't understand the bank statements, but he understood the photo. He looked at Danny, and then he looked at me. He was mean to you, Lou, Christopher said. His voice was clear. Yes, Chris. He was. I stood up. There is a car pulling into the driveway right now, I said. It's not the realtor. It's an officer from the sheriff's department and a social worker from Adult Protective Services. Janet started to scream. Danny started to beg. But I didn't hear them. I walked over to the sink. I picked up a plate, and for the first time in 40 years, I let it slip through my fingers. It felt wonderful. The performance is over, I said. Now, let's talk about your eviction. The flashing blue lights hit the kitchen window. Janet stopped screaming. Danny stood there, frozen, with his hand still reaching for the bank statement. Mom, he whispered, you're overreacting. We were just worried. It was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. I asked. I reached into my navy blue dress pocket. I pulled out my phone. I've been recording everything since the day I came home from the hospital, Danny, including your conversation this morning about how you were going to convince me to sign the power of attorney before the realtor arrived. I hit the play button. The kitchen was filled with Danny's voice. She's getting forgetful again. January. We just need her to sign the insurance form. Once the house is sold, she won't have a choice. She'll have to go to Florida. Then came Janet's laugh. She's so desperate for your love, Danny. She'll sign anything if you just hug her and tell her she's a good mom. It's almost too easy. Danny's face turned from white to a sickly, mottled red. He looked at the floor. He couldn't look at me. Is that misunderstanding enough for you, Danny? A heavy knock sounded at the door. Sheriff's Department. Open up. I walked to the door. My legs felt strong. I opened the door. Officer Miller was standing there. I've known him since he was in high school. Next to him was a woman in a gray suit. Louise, you okay? Miller asked. He looked past me at Danny and Janet. I'm fine, Ben, I said, but I have some guests who are currently trespassing. I turned back to the table. I picked up the last piece of paper from my folder. It wasn't a bank statement. It was a legal eviction notice, signed by a judge on Friday afternoon. You have 1 hour, I said, to get your boxes out of my guest room, to get your SUVs out of my driveway, and to get your hands off my life. 1 hour? Janet shrieked. She looked at the officer. You can't do that. We live here. We have rights. Actually, ma'am, Officer Miller said, Mrs. Best has filed a report of elder endangerment. And since she is the sole owner of this property and you have no lease, you need to move along. Janet turned on Danny. Do something, she yelled. Tell her she's crazy. Tell them she's having a heart attack. Danny didn't move. He looked at me, and for a second, I saw the little boy I used to tuck into bed. The boy who was afraid of the dark. Mom, please, he begged. We have nowhere to go. Florida is gone. I lost the deposit on the condo. We're broke. I know you are, Danny. I said, I saw your bank alerts on the iPad too. You spent your last $5,000 on Janet's highlights and that fancy cigar humidor. I walked over to him. I stood right in front of him. I'm 5'2" and he's 6 feet tall. But in that moment, I felt like a giant. You didn't just throw away my heart meds, Danny. I whispered. You threw away your mother. I saw the tears start to well up in his eyes. I didn't feel sorry for him. I didn't feel that motherly urge to pull him to my chest. I felt finished. The family legacy fund. I said aloud, the $200,000 you were counting on, it's gone. Janet gasped. Where is it? It's in an irrevocable trust, I said, for Christopher's care. It pays for his doctors. It pays for his medications. And it pays for a private nurse who will come here 3 times a week, so I can finally have a cup of coffee in peace. You can't touch a penny of it, Danny. Not now. Not when I die. Not ever. But that's my inheritance, Danny stammered. You inherited your father's eyes and my stubbornness, Danny, I said, but you didn't inherit our respect. And you certainly didn't inherit our home. Officer Miller stepped forward. All right, folks, let's go. I'll stand here while you pack your essentials. The next hour was a blur of noise. Janet was throwing clothes into suitcases, cursing at the walls. Danny was carrying boxes out to the driveway, his head down, looking at his shoes. I sat at the kitchen table with Christopher. I poured him a glass of milk. Are they going on a trip, Lou? He asked. He looked confused, but he wasn't scared. He could feel the peace returning to the house. Yes, Chris, I said. They're going on a very long trip. Martha Higgins came through the back door. She was carrying a tray of lemon bars. She looked at the chaos in the driveway. Then she looked at me. I saw them leaving. Lou, she said. She sat down next to me and squeezed my hand. How do you feel? I took a deep breath. My lungs felt wide. My chest felt light. I feel like I can breathe, Martha, I whispered. For the first time in 3 months, I can actually breathe. I watched from the window as the 2 SUVs backed out of the driveway. Janet flipped me off as she turned the corner. Danny didn't even look back. The blue lights of the police car followed them out of the neighborhood. The house went silent. No more whispering in the hallways. No more hiding pill bottles in knitting bags. No more acting to keep the peace. I walked over to the trash can, the one where Janet had thrown my life-saving medicine. I took it outside to the big bin at the curb. I watched the lid close. "Goodbye, Danny," I said to the empty street. I walked back into my house. My home. I locked the door. And then I went to the kitchen and finished the dishes. I did them slowly, with plenty of soap. And for the first time in 40 years, I didn't dry them for anyone but myself. But the story wasn't quite over yet, because Janet was about to find out that I hadn't just filed an eviction. I had filed a police report, and in Ohio, the law has a very long memory. It has been 6 months since those SUVs pulled out of my driveway. 6 months since I last saw the back of Janet's phone. I am not in Ohio anymore. I'm sitting on a patio in Scottsdale, Arizona. The air here is dry. It's warm. It smells like sage and desert flowers. I sold the house on Willow Creek. The $450,000 went exactly where it belonged. Half went into a trust for Christopher. The other half bought this beautiful 2-bedroom villa. Christopher is sitting across from me. He's wearing a straw hat. He's watching the hummingbirds at the feeder. He still has his bad days. But here, the bad days are safe. We have a medical team that comes by every morning. They don't roll their eyes. They don't call me dramatic. They check my heart rhythm. They sort our pills into neat, clear containers. I don't have to hide my medicine in a knitting bag anymore. My neighbor here, her name is Rose. She's 75. She was a nurse for 30 years. We went to lunch yesterday at a little cafe down the street. I felt a small flutter in my chest, just a tiny one. I didn't even have to say anything. Rose saw me reach for my water. She saw my hand shake just a little. "Louise," she said. She reached over and put her hand on my wrist. "Take a breath. I've got your bag. Let's just sit for a minute until it passes." I started to cry. Right there over my chicken salad. "What's wrong, honey?" Rose asked. "Nothing," I whispered. "It's just, I forgot what it felt like to be seen. I forgot that I'm allowed to be human." As for Danny and Janet, the news reached me through Martha Higgins. She still calls me every Sunday from Ohio. "Louise," she told me last week, "I saw Danny at the post office. He was picking up a stack of final notice bills. Apparently, once the home sale fell through, their world collapsed. They are living in a 1-bedroom apartment in a bad part of Cleveland. Danny is working 2 jobs just to pay the rent. Janet's true colors didn't take long to show. Now that there is no big house and no inheritance, she has turned her venom on Danny. Martha says they can be heard screaming at each other through the thin walls of their building. Janet is facing 3 years of probation for the elder endangerment charges I filed. She has to take empathy classes. I don't think they'll work. You can't teach a snake how to be a person. Danny called me last night. I saw his name on the screen. I let it ring. Then I listened to the voicemail. "Mom," he said. His voice sounded cracked. "Old. Janet is leaving me. She says I'm a loser. I'm so sorry about the pills. I was just stressed. Can I come out there? Just for a few weeks?" I deleted the message. I don't hate him, but the mother who would have said, yes, died on that kitchen floor. I look at the sunset now. The sky is a deep, burning orange. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. If you are watching this, and you are sitting in a house where you feel invisible, if you are hiding your pain, so you won't be a burden to your children, listen to me. Your life is your own. You spent 40 years building a world for them. You don't have to spend your last 20 years being a ghost in it. Do not let your love for your children become a cage for your dignity. They may share your blood, but they do not own your breath. I reached for my water glass. My hand was steady. My heart was in rhythm. I'm Louise Best, and for the first time in my life, I am exactly where I am supposed to be.